Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Nothing Tool It. I'm your host, the Tool It Guy, and today we're going to be learning how to use the measuring tape.
Nothing Tool It.
Let's go over the basic anatomy of your measuring tape. First of all, you have what is the case. This contains the blade or tape of your measuring tape. This here is what's known as your blade or tape. Using this thumb lock here, you can push it down and it locks the tape in place, allowing it to not snap back into your case when needing to hold a measurement. To let this go back in, you simply unlock the thumb lock and it fires back in. On the end of your tape, you'll notice there's a hook. This hook allows you to catch onto surfaces while trying to measure over greater distances. Also, on the front of this hook, there is a hook slot. This allows you to hook over like little screw heads when trying to maybe do some on-center measuring with wood or simply to like make a circle. You'll notice on some other measuring tapes, they'll have like hand straps that you can hook around your wrist. Others have belt clips. And on this one in particular, it also has magnets on the front. This is if you're doing some work with metal. You can see it actually grabs onto the hook. Also, on some of these, you'll notice on the front, it gives you some measurements. This tells you that it's a 25-foot long measuring tape. And it also tells you that its size is 3 inches. What that means is, if you're measuring an inside dimension somewhere, say you're trying to measure a distance in between these two measuring tapes, you could potentially just measure across here and do 8 inches plus the 3 inches if you were using this tape, knowing that this whole thing would be 11 inches. Just to verify that last bit of information about the measuring tape case being 3 inches wide, you can take another measuring tape, hook it on the edge, go across, showing that it is in fact 3 inches wide. This comes in very handy when you're trying to measure in between studs or window casings, or just simply trying to get a great distance across your floor in your house measuring rooms. Some measuring tapes have special markings. You'll also notice that some measuring tapes also have 2 types of measurements on it. This one, for instance, has both the Imperial and metric system on it. Some of them just have the Imperial system on it, and sometimes they differ a little bit as to the design and how they do their markings. For instance, this one, when you get to 1 foot, it shows it in like a little black block. On other ones, it's represented by a black arrow. You'll also notice when you get to the 16, that's usually also accented by red. This helps you when you're doing carpentry work, measuring stud distances on center. So when you get from 16 inches, getting upwards to 32, it'll also be measured with a red number as well to make it easier when doing carpentry work on houses and walls. Another thing you'll notice is that there's a black diamond here. This black diamond is to measure the distances on center for floor joists. Every 19.2 inches ends up adding up to a perfect 8 feet. So if you had a room that was like 8 feet by 8 feet, you could actually find studs for screwing subfloor down quite easily when using these measurements. You'll notice that not every single measuring tape you pick up or use has all of these special markings. For instance, this measuring tape here, it doesn't have that 19.2 inch black diamond marking. It also isn't using the red 16-inch markings for your stud measurements. You may also find on some cheaper made ones that it doesn't even have the width marked anywhere on your case to tell you how wide this is when measuring inside dimensions. So you have to look over your measuring tapes to make sure you know what you're actually using and how you're going to use it. On to reading the actual measuring tape. Measuring tapes we're doing using inches is actually the Imperial system. Every 12 inches has a foot. In between each of those inches, you'll notice that there are all these little ticks between 0 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. It just goes on and on. On other things like steel rulers, you'll see it shows a little 16 here. That means there's 16 ticks in between 0 and 1 inch and 16 between 1 and 2 inches. Sometimes if you need your measurements to get a little more detailed, sometimes you'll have them with 30 seconds, which means there's 32 of these ticks within 1 inch, and so on in between every inch. I'm going to show you that on this piece of paper by drawing it out in a much more exploded view so that you can see it a little more detailed and go through how those fractions come to be when you're reading your measuring tape. Start off by drawing our measuring tape on one side of the paper. Draw the tape all the way across. And this is our hook at the beginning of the measuring tape. And this is where 0 starts. Down here, this is where we're going to have 1 inch. The first breakdown in measurements is half. In order to help with this division as we go, I'm going to draw just a little circle in here and break it down as we go. So breaking that in half. Like the measuring tape, you have 1/2 here, 2 halves here, making 1 whole inch, much like your pie. You'd have half and the other half making 1 whole pie. Let's just make this a nice little tasty, flaky crusted pumpkin pie. Who doesn't like pie, right? Going down the next step. So every time you go down from like halves to quarters or eighths or sixteenths, you are essentially doubling the amount of ticks that you're going to have on your measuring tape. So moving forward, we have 1/4, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then 4 quarters. On your pie, breaking that down in half again, that's your 1/4 inch of pie. Moving on to eighths. One eighths, 2 eighths, 3 eighths, 4 eighths, 5 eighths, 6 eighths, 7 eighths, 8 eighths. Breaking that in half again, gives you 1/8 of a slice of pie. This is where people get confused when they're reading measurements. You'll notice that 1/2 inch can also be 2/4 or 4/8. Broken down to the smallest denomination is still a 1/2 inch. It's just a matter of what increment you're measuring in. Moving on to 16ths. We have 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16, 9/16, 10/16, 11/16, 12/16, 13/16, 14/16, 15/16, and 16/16. 30 seconds. Oh, wait. Divide our pie once more. We have 1/16. Breaking it down even further. 1/32, 2/32, 3/32, 4/32, 5/32, 6/32, 7/32, 8/32, 9/32, 10/32, 11/32, 12/32, 13/32, 14/32, 15/32, 16/32, 17/32, 18/32, 19/32, 20/32, 21/32, 22/32, 23/32, 24/32, 25/32, 26/32, 27/32, 28/32, 29/32, 30/32, 31/32, and 32/32. 1/32. And lastly, the 64ths. I'm not going to have enough room to write all those incremental numbers in there, so I'm just going to go underneath and do 64 ticks. And you'll know that each tick going up incrementally from 1 to 64 and so on and so forth. You'll see sometimes all these groupings represent different series of fractions on your measuring tape. Just keep in mind which increment you're using in reference to what's being actually measured on your tape. I hope breaking down all these fractions has been helpful. I know it's long, boring, and tedious to sit through listening to all those numbers, but I guarantee it helps when you actually physically sit down, break it down one by one, and see what you're actually looking at on the tape. Taking a look now at our metric system, you'll notice on some measuring tapes, shows that it's reading things in millimeters. Each one of these little ticks represents 1 millimeter. Every time you have 10 millimeters, it equals 1 centimeter. When you get up to 1,000, that equals 1 meter, or 1,000 millimeters, or 100 centimeters. I'm going to go into that a little bit with you now. What we're going to start off with is another crude drawing of a measuring tape. Here's our tape and our hook. Starting here is 0. And we'll work in increments of millimeters first. So every centimeter has 10 millimeters. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is usually a larger line in the middle of your tape between the tens. So every 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, in between all those numbers, there's a larger tick representing a 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 millimeters. When you get up to 10 millimeters, that also equals 1 centimeter. As you get higher in the scale, you may find yourself upwards at the 900 millimeter area. So every 100 millimeters is a decimeter. As you get even further up the scale, say you're at 990, and you're trying to get to 1,000, which is 1 meter. You'd have 990, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 1,000 millimeters equals 1 meter. You'll see that on the measuring tape marked here by a black block that has an M on it. So say you end up needing to make this measurement here, the one right after the 10. It's actually 11 millimeters, or 1.1 centimeters. Since it's broken down in tens for every centimeter, for all these millimeters in between a centimeter, you could potentially do your 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 if you're doing your measurements in centimeters. If you're just sticking with millimeters, you can just simply read it as 11 millimeters. To help with some of the math from that previous clip, I wrote down all the breakdowns of each of these numbers depending on the increment that you're using. So if you're using meters, that also equals 1,000 millimeters, or 100 centimeters, or 10 decimeters. If you're working in the decimeters, that equals 100 millimeters, or 10 centimeters. 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters, and 1 millimeter is its smallest increment. So showing you down below, I used 999 millimeters. It's just shy of 1 meter. So if we were using it in the increment of meters, it'd be 0.999 meters. If you're trying to do it in the decimeters, you'd move the decimal place once, and you have 9.99 decimeters. Or if you need to work it in centimeters, you can move the decimal place again, and it's 99.9 centimeters. So if we look back at our measuring tape, you'll notice at the 100 mark, leading up to the 10 for 110 millimeters, you'll see that there's 10 ticks in between. And you'll see that the fifth one, as we talked about earlier, is longer for making easier counting. If you're working in centimeters instead of millimeters, these divisions of 10 help break it down. Like I'm going to show you here on this page. Down at the bottom, you see I wrote down that 1 centimeter or 10 millimeters can be broken down into those tens if you're working in centimeters rather than millimeters. So you'd have 0.1 centimeter, 0.2, 0.3, representing each tick along the way. 0.5 is halfway, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. Once you get here, 1 centimeter. This concludes today's episode on how to read a measuring tape. And remember, there's nothing to it.